Welcome everybody to a brand new video with Fox Bladder. I'm extremely excited for today's painting. Today's painting is a little bit different than the normal. It is for a contest. The contest is Draw with Jazza, his art page challenge of the month. This month is Untraditional Art. So I was extremely excited to get started on this and ended up getting started right away, even though I had other stuff to do. But yeah, everything that I used was from the kitchen, except for one thing, I think, because I used henna, which is edible because it's all natural, but I wouldn't recommend it because it probably doesn't taste very good. But everything else was like teas, beet juice, and herbs and spices. I ended up using chili powder, paprika, and a few other random things. So I hope you enjoy, and let's get started. I started off by adding all the teas and henna at first. I originally had grenadine and Worcestershire sauce, but they were kind of too sticky. So I just added water to like the coffee and the teas and the henna, and let them sit for a little while before starting. I eventually ended up adding beet juice and basil leaves to add a few other colors because I thought the hibiscus would be red, but surprisingly hibiscus doesn't dry red. After everything steeped for a little while, I did a little test swatch on a canvas that has a hole in it, if you can see in the little corner, and just to get an idea of what I'm going to be working with and how everything dries. Once I got an idea of how everything was going to dry, I started on the actual canvas painting, which I realized after starting that it was going to be a little more challenging than I thought, because it's kind of like watercolor on canvas, which doesn't dry, it doesn't go on just right. And then I started doing some liquid masking tape to put on some where of the highlights were gonna be, since where it's kind of like watercolors, it is a little more difficult to actually add the highlights in because there's no white. I ended up doing the background trees with hibiscus tea and green tea, which made this kind of bluish, cool, greenish color with a little bit of yellow. And then the river is also hibiscus. And then I went over the background, all of the backgrounds, trying to avoid the animals that I drew out in coffee. I then used Thai tea for the fox color, which I ended up having to go over multiple times because it dried lighter, and then I used the henna for the deer. I also used the henna for the trees in the backgrounds. All the background trees are with the henna, and then when I got to the bigger trees in the foreground, I ended up using coffee to make them a little bit lighter before going over them with other stuff like henna and hibiscus for shading. shading also was a little bit harder than everything was a little harder than I expected it to be, but because it's so watery, every time I went over stuff, it didn't really necessarily get any darker. I tried steeping different brews to make them stronger, but that also didn't seem to work. So what I ended up doing is trying to mix colors, and I found that if I mixed henna with the hibiscus, if I did it right, it made it black. And then if I mixed, I don't remember which way it was, but one of the ways made black, and then one of the ways just made a darker brown. So that's what I ended up doing, is just going over everything with hibiscus to make a darker color, which I think that's how it made the black, as you can kind of see. And then going back over with the henna to make a darker brown as well. At this point, I ended up using chili powder to put on some of the leaves for the trees, because I found that the Thai tea wasn't actually dark enough, and I used paprika for the back of the trees, but that, as you can see, also wasn't dark enough, so I went back over with chili powder, and then I started using the beet juice. At this point, I decided that it was far enough along that I could take off the liquid masking tape and bring out some of the highlights where I didn't think that I would be going over with color again, just to see if there was anything I needed to fix after taking off the liquid masking tape. I ended up using 2 different tones of beet juice. The first tone I ended up using was the greens of the beet juice, which was a little bit duller and more of an orangey color. And then I went back over with the beet juice that I boiled for longer with the actual beets, which is a much brighter red. For the final touches, I went back over some areas with water and then dabbed it with a paper towel to take away some of the color to add some more highlights. It's not very white, but it was just enough to add a little bit of highlights to the trees. After finishing the highlights and adding a little bit of everything else, I still felt like it wasn't complete, so I ended up crushing up some basil and adding it to the background to make a hint of green. And since it was more of a paste, I ended up having to do it with my fingers with the leaves crushed up. I really enjoyed doing this painting, and I'm so glad that I found Jazza's channel and his contest, because I would have never thought to do any of this otherwise. And the next challenge will be finding a way to seal it so I can actually keep the painting. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like and a comment if you did, and don't forget to check out my Etsy page and some of my other stuff like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks. Bye!